I let my granddaughter call me poor in front of her fiance's entire family during Thanksgiving dinner. She had no idea I owned the company where her future father-in-law worked. But by the end of that night, everyone at that table would learn the price of shame. And trust me, they earned every second of what came next. Let me tell you how I got there. My name is Eleanor Whitmore. I am 68 years old. I have been a widow for 11 years, and I have spent the last 4 decades building something most people cannot even imagine. But you would never know it by looking at me. You would never guess that the woman in the faded cardigan, the one who clips coupons and drives a 12-year-old Honda, controls a financial empire worth more than $300 million. I did not inherit this money. I did not marry into it. I built it, penny by penny, decision by decision, sacrifice by sacrifice, starting from nothing. Starting from a place so low that most people would have given up before they even began. My daughter Patricia was born when I was 23. Her father left before she could walk. He said he was not ready for responsibility. He said he needed to find himself. What he found was a younger woman in another state, and a life that did not include diaper changes or midnight feedings or the constant exhaustion of parenthood. I raised Patricia alone. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3. I cleaned offices at night while she slept in a carrier beside me. I typed reports during my lunch breaks. I took accounting classes at the community college on Saturday mornings while a neighbor watched her for $5 an hour. And slowly, impossibly, I climbed. From secretary to bookkeeper, from bookkeeper to accountant, from accountant to financial analyst, from analyst to investment manager. And finally, after 20 years of proving myself in rooms full of men who assumed I was there to take notes, I became the CEO of Whitmore Capital Management. I built that company from nothing. I named it after myself because no one else was going to remember me. I made it into something that mattered, something that lasted, something that could not be ignored. But I never told Patricia the full truth. I never explained the extent of what I had created. She knew I worked in finance. She knew I had done well, but she thought I was comfortable, not wealthy. She thought I had enough, not more than enough. And I let her believe that because I wanted her to build her own life, to find her own success, to understand that nothing valuable comes without effort. Maybe that was my first mistake. Patricia married a man named Gerald when she was 26. Gerald was handsome and charming and completely allergic to hard work. He had big dreams and small follow-through. He started businesses that failed. He invested in schemes that collapsed. He borrowed money he could not repay and made promises he could not keep. I watched my daughter support him for 15 years. I watched her work overtime while he played golf. I watched her cancel vacations while he bought new clubs. I watched her shrink herself to make room for his ego. And I said nothing, because she was an adult and she had to make her own choices. But I kept records. I always keep records. They had 1 daughter together, my granddaughter Meredith. She was born when Patricia was 32, and from the moment I held her, I felt something crack open in my chest. Something fierce and protective and terrifying. I loved that child more than I had ever loved anything. I held her when she cried. I read her stories until my voice went hoarse. I attended every school play, every soccer game, every piano recital. I was there for skinned knees and broken hearts and the 1,000 small disasters of childhood. And Meredith loved me back. At least, I thought she did. When she was 8, she told me I was her favorite person in the whole world. When she was 12, she said she wanted to be just like me when she grew up. When she was 16, she asked if she could live with me during the summers because her parents were always fighting and my house was the only place that felt peaceful. I said yes. Of course I said yes. Those summers were the happiest times of my life. Meredith and I would garden together, cook together, watch old movies together. We would sit on the porch swing at night and talk about everything, about her dreams and fears and hopes for the future. She wanted to be a doctor. She wanted to help people. She wanted to make a difference. I was so proud of her, so impossibly proud. I paid for her college education, all of it, every tuition bill, every textbook, every dormitory fee. I told Patricia it was coming from a scholarship fund I had invested in years ago. I did not want Meredith to feel indebted. I did not want her to carry that weight. She graduated with honors. She got into medical school. And somewhere along the way, she met a man named Bradley Thornton III. Before you continue, if you have ever loved someone who made you question that love, check if you are subscribed. Because some stories are mirrors, and this one might show you something you recognize. Bradley came from old money. His grandfather had founded Thornton Industries, a manufacturing conglomerate that had made the family obscenely wealthy 3 generations ago. His father, Bradley Thornton II, ran the company now, or rather, he sat in the corner office while actual talented people did the real work. I knew the Thorntons by reputation. Everyone in the financial world knew them. They were the kind of family that confused inheritance with achievement. They believed that being born into privilege was the same as earning it. They looked down on anyone who had actually worked for what they had. I had done business with Thornton Industries years ago. They did not know who I was. To them, Whitmore Capital was just another investment firm, one of dozens they dealt with. They had no idea that the elderly woman in the sensible shoes was the person who held significant portions of their company's debt. Meredith brought Bradley home to meet the family on a crisp October weekend, 2 years before that Thanksgiving dinner. She was glowing, radiant, completely, desperately in love. I tried to keep an open mind. I really did. Bradley was tall and polished and expensively dressed. He had the easy confidence of someone who had never been told no. He shook my hand with just enough pressure to seem respectful, without actually meaning it. He called me ma'am in a way that made it sound like grandmother would have been too intimate. "We are so pleased to meet you," he said, smiling that practiced smile. "Meredith has told us so much about you. Us, not me, us." As if his family was already part of him, inseparable, a unit he could not function without. I made lunch. Nothing fancy, just soup and sandwiches, the kind of simple meal I had always prepared. Bradley looked at the spread with barely concealed disappointment. "This is very," he paused, searching for the word. "Quaint. Very homey. My mother usually has our chef prepare something when we have guests, but I suppose this has its own charm." Meredith laughed nervously. "Grammy has always been practical. She does not believe in showing off." Bradley nodded, clearly filing that information away under poor but acceptable. "That is admirable, I suppose. These days everyone is so concerned with appearances." I watched him eat my soup like it was a punishment he had to endure. I watched him glance around my modest living room, taking in the secondhand furniture, the old television, the lack of expensive artwork. I watched him calculate my worth and find me wanting. And I said nothing. I smiled and nodded and asked polite questions about his family, his work, his plans for the future. I was gathering information. I was assessing the threat. Because make no mistake, Bradley Thornton III was a threat. Not to me, but to my granddaughter. I could see it in the way he touched her, possessive rather than affectionate. I could see it in the way he answered for her, as if her own words were not sufficient. I could see it in the way he looked at her, like she was a reflection of himself rather than a person in her own right. But Meredith could not see any of it. She was too close, too in love, too desperate to believe she had found her happy ending. They got engaged 6 months later. Bradley proposed at his family's estate in Connecticut, surrounded by 300 of their closest friends and family. Meredith called me crying with joy and I congratulated her while something cold settled in my stomach. The wedding planning began immediately. The Thorntons insisted on paying for everything, which meant the Thorntons controlled everything. The venue would be their country club, the caterer would be their personal chef, the guest list would be dominated by their associates and connections. Meredith's side of the family was treated as an afterthought. We were allocated 30 invitations total. 30. For Patricia and Gerald, for me, for distant cousins and college friends, and anyone else Meredith wanted to include. The Thorntons were inviting 400 people from their side alone. But that was not even the worst part. The worst part was the rehearsal dinner that happened 1 month before the wedding. The Thorntons hosted it at a private room in the most exclusive restaurant in the city. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, waiters in tuxedos, everything designed to impress, to intimidate, to establish the hierarchy before anyone even sat down. I wore my best dress, which was still 10 years old and bought on sale. Patricia wore something borrowed from a friend. Gerald wore his only suit, the one with the slightly frayed cuffs that he always tried to hide. We were seated at the far end of the table, as far from the Thorntons as physically possible without actually being in another room. Bradley's mother, Vivian, glanced at us occasionally with the kind of expression usually reserved for unexpected stains on expensive furniture. Halfway through dinner, Vivian stood up to make a toast. To Bradley and Meredith, she said, her voice carrying perfectly across the room. We are so thrilled to welcome Meredith into our family. She is a lovely girl, truly lovely, and we are confident that with the right guidance, she will fit in beautifully with our traditions and expectations. The right guidance, as if my granddaughter was a fixer-upper that needed renovation, Vivian continued. Of course, we understand that Meredith comes from more humble circumstances. Her mother, she gestured vaguely toward Patricia, has worked very hard, and her grandmother, a dismissive glance in my direction, well, we all do what we can with what we have. The important thing is that Meredith has Bradley now, and through him, she has access to opportunities she never could have imagined. I felt Patricia stiffen beside me. I felt my own hands clench under the table, but I said nothing. I kept my face neutral, my expression mild, my eyes on my plate, because I was not ready yet. I was still watching, still learning, still planning. After the toast, Bradley's father approached our end of the table. Bradley Thornton II was a large man with a loud voice and the unshakable belief that everyone wanted to hear his opinions. So, he said, looking down at Gerald, "What is it you do exactly?" Gerald straightened in his chair, trying to project confidence he did not feel. "I am between ventures at the moment. I have some irons in the fire, some opportunities I am exploring." Bradley II nodded, already bored. "And you?" He turned to Patricia. "Meredith mentioned you work in an office somewhere?" "I am an administrative assistant," Patricia said quietly, "at a real estate company." Bradley II made a sound that was not quite a laugh. "Well, honest work is nothing to be ashamed of. Someone has to answer the phones, right?" Patricia's face flushed red. Gerald looked at his plate, and Bradley II turned to me. "And you must be the grandmother. Eleanor, is it?" "Yes," I said. "Eleanor Whitmore." "Whitmore." He frowned slightly. "That name sounds familiar. Do I know you from somewhere?" "I doubt it," I replied. "I have lived a very quiet life." He shrugged, already losing interest. "Well, it is nice to meet you. I hope you enjoy the dinner. I know it is probably fancier than what you are used to, but our family believes in doing things properly." He walked away before I could respond, which was probably for the best, because what I wanted to say would not have been appropriate for polite company. That night, in the parking lot, Patricia broke down crying. "I am so sorry, Mom. I am so sorry you had to sit through that. Those people are awful. They are condescending and rude, and they treat us like we are nothing. I held my daughter while she cried. I smoothed her hair the way I had when she was small, and I made a decision. I would not say anything yet. I would not reveal myself. I would wait until the moment was perfect, until the stage was set, until every player was in position. Because if there is one thing I learned in 40 years of business, it is this: timing is everything. And the Thorntons had no idea what was coming. The months leading up to the wedding were a masterclass in humiliation, small cuts delivered with surgical precision, death by 1,000 paper cuts, all dressed up in designer clothing and dripping with false concern. Vivian called Patricia once a week to discuss wedding details that had already been decided. She would ask for input, then ignore whatever Patricia suggested. She would mention the cost of things, always the cost, as if reminding us how much we could not contribute. "The flowers alone are costing us $40,000, Vivian said during one call, her voice carrying through Patricia's speakerphone while I sat nearby. "But of course, we want only the best for our Bradley. I am sure you understand. If you need to bring something less expensive as your gift, please do not feel embarrassed. We know you are doing your best." Bradley started calling Meredith's childhood home the Little House, in a tone that made it sound like an insult. He referred to my apartment as grandmother's place, as if it were a category rather than a home. He made jokes about Meredith's student loans at dinner parties, always adding, "But of course I took care of those ages ago." What kind of husband lets his wife carry debt? And Meredith said nothing. She laughed along with his jokes. She apologized for her family's modest means. She slowly, inexorably began to distance herself from us. She stopped calling me every Sunday like she used to. She canceled 3 visits to my apartment in a row, always with vague excuses about being too busy with wedding planning. When we did speak, she talked only about Bradley, about his work, about his family, about the amazing life they were going to have together. I felt her slipping away like sand through my fingers. I felt the connection we had built over decades dissolving in the acid of the Thorntons' contempt. And still, I waited, because I knew something the Thorntons did not. I knew that Bradley II's company was in trouble. I knew that Thornton Industries had made a series of bad investments, had overextended their credit, had bet everything on a product line that was failing. I knew because my firm held 30% of their corporate debt. I knew because I had been watching their numbers for months, waiting for the right moment. The invitation to Thanksgiving dinner came 3 weeks before the wedding. Meredith called, her voice bright and brittle with forced enthusiasm. "Grammy, the Thorntons are hosting Thanksgiving at their estate this year, and they have invited all of us. Is that not wonderful? We can all be together as one family before the big day." I agreed to come. Of course I did. On Thanksgiving morning, I dressed carefully. I chose my oldest cardigan, the one with the slightly stretched buttons. I wore my most worn shoes, the ones with the sole beginning to separate. I carried my ancient purse, the one I had bought at a thrift store 20 years ago. I looked like what they expected me to be: poor, harmless, forgettable. Patricia picked me up in her aging minivan. Gerald sat in the front seat, already nervous, already preparing himself for an evening of subtle insults. Meredith and Bradley had driven up separately the night before, already absorbed into the Thornton orbit. The Thornton estate was everything you would expect from people who wanted everyone to know they were rich. A long driveway lined with ancient oaks. A mansion that looked like it had been airlifted from the English countryside. Servants, actual servants, waiting at the entrance to take our coats. Vivian greeted us in the foyer, wearing a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than Patricia's car. Her smile was fixed, professional, utterly devoid of warmth. "So glad you could make it," she said, the way someone might say, "So glad you survived the plague." "Dinner will be served in the main dining room. Please, make yourselves comfortable in the sitting room until then." The sitting room was filled with Thorntons, Bradley's aunts and uncles, his cousins, his grandmother, who was even more terrifying than Vivian. They looked at us like we were zoo exhibits, interesting in a mildly distasteful way. Meredith rushed over, beautiful in a silk dress that Bradley had clearly chosen for her. It was nothing like the clothes she used to wear, nothing like the person she used to be. "Grammy, I am so happy you came." She hugged me, but it felt rehearsed, performative. "Come, meet everyone. This is Aunt Catherine and Uncle Theodore and Cousin Sebastian." I shook hands. I smiled. I made small talk about the lovely weather and the beautiful home and how fortunate Meredith was to be joining such a wonderful family. I played my role perfectly. Bradley appeared at Meredith's side, his hand possessive on her waist. "Eleanor, so nice to see you again. Still driving that old car, I noticed. You know, if you ever need help upgrading to something more reliable, I am sure we could find something appropriate for you. Nothing too fancy, of course, but something that will not break down." "You are very kind," I said, "but my car serves me just fine." He smiled that condescending smile. "Well, if you ever change your mind, we take care of family around here." We, not I. We. Always the collective, always the tribe, always making sure you knew you were an outsider. Dinner was served at a table long enough to seat 40 people. The Thorntons occupied the center, radiating outward in order of importance. Patricia, Gerald, and I were placed at the very end, so far from the main conversation that we might as well have been in another room. The food was elaborate and plentiful and completely joyless. Turkey with truffle stuffing, lobster bisque, imported cheeses I could not pronounce. Everything designed to impress rather than to comfort. Bradley II stood up to give a toast, as he apparently did at every family gathering. His voice boomed across the table, commanding attention through sheer volume. Another year of blessings for the Thornton family. Another year of success, of growth, of expanding our legacy. He raised his glass. And this year we have a special reason to celebrate. Our Bradley is finally getting married, and he has chosen a wonderful girl. A bit rough around the edges, perhaps, but nothing that cannot be polished with time. Polished, like a piece of furniture, like an object to be improved. He continued, "Of course, we know Meredith comes from simpler stock. Her grandmother," he gestured vaguely toward me without really looking, "is a sweet old woman who I am told worked in some office somewhere. Her mother does clerical work. Her father, well," he paused for effect. "We will not dwell on that. The point is, Meredith has risen above her circumstances through Bradley. Through him, she will have opportunities her family never could have provided." I watched Meredith's face as her grandfather spoke. She was not cringing. She was not embarrassed. She was nodding along, accepting these characterizations as truth, accepting that her family was something to be risen above. That is when I felt it. That cold, clear feeling I get when I have finally gathered enough information, when I have finally identified the perfect moment, when I know it is time to act. But I waited still. The best moment had not yet arrived. After the toast, conversation broke into smaller clusters. Bradley II began interrogating Gerald about his non-existent career prospects. Vivian was instructing Patricia on proper etiquette, as if my daughter did not know which fork to use. And Meredith pulled me aside into a quiet corner of the dining room. "Grammy," she said, her voice low and urgent, "I need to talk to you about something." "Of course, dear. What is it?" She hesitated, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "Bradley and I have been discussing the wedding gifts. We have asked for cash contributions to our honeymoon fund instead of physical presents." "That sounds lovely," I said. "Yes, well," Meredith shifted uncomfortably. "The Thorntons have been very generous. His grandmother is giving us $50,000. His parents are contributing 100,000. His aunts and uncles, well, the gifts have been substantial. She paused, and I understood what she was trying to say. You are worried about what I can contribute, I said quietly. Meredith's face flushed. No, Grammy, that is not what I meant. I know you do not have much. I know your pension barely covers your expenses. I am not asking for anything. She took a deep breath. I just need you to understand that when the gift amounts are announced at the reception, it might be embarrassing if there is a huge disparity. Announced? I repeated. The gift amounts will be announced publicly? It is a Thornton tradition, Meredith said, as if that explained everything. They display the contributions on a board. It is supposed to encourage generosity. But I do not want you to feel bad when your name is up there with, a smaller amount. I see, I said. And what would you suggest I do? Meredith looked at the floor. Maybe you could just not give anything. Just say that your presence is your gift. That way there is nothing to compare, nothing for people to notice. And there it was, my granddaughter. The little girl I had held and loved and supported through everything was asking me to bow out of her wedding because my gift would be too embarrassingly small to display next to the Thornton wealth. Are you asking me to pretend I cannot afford a gift? I asked, my voice perfectly neutral. Meredith nodded, still not meeting my eyes. I know it sounds terrible, but it is just easier this way, for everyone. I looked at my granddaughter. I looked at the woman she had become, the woman the Thorntons had molded her into. I looked at the shame she felt for me, for her mother, for everyone who had loved her before Bradley came along. And I made my decision. I understand completely, I said. Do not worry about me. I will handle it appropriately. Meredith looked up, relief flooding her face. Thank you, Grammy. I knew you would understand. You have always been so practical. She hugged me quickly, then hurried back to Bradley's side, already forgetting our conversation, already forgetting me. I returned to my seat at the far end of the table. I ate my dinner in silence. I watched the Thorntons laugh and boast and count their blessings, never realizing that the quiet old woman at the end of the table was counting something else entirely. I was counting the minutes until I could destroy their arrogance forever. The wedding was 3 weeks away. I had work to do. The Monday after Thanksgiving, I went to my office. Not the small home office I maintained to keep up appearances, but the real one. The corner suite on the 47th floor of a glass tower downtown. The one with my name etched in gold on the door. Eleanor Whitmore, founder and CEO. My assistant Margaret looked up as I entered. Good morning, Eleanor. How was your Thanksgiving? Enlightening, I said. I need the Thornton Industries file, everything we have, and schedule a call with our legal team for this afternoon. Margaret nodded, asking no questions. She had worked with me for 15 years and knew better than to inquire about my plans before I was ready to share them. I spent the next week buried in documents, financial statements, debt obligations, credit arrangements. The picture that emerged was even worse than I had suspected. Thornton Industries was drowning. Their flagship product line had failed. Their stock price was plummeting. They had leveraged everything, their real estate holdings, their personal assets, even the family estate, to secure loans that were coming due in the new year. And my firm held the largest portion of that debt. If I called those loans in, the Thorntons would be forced into bankruptcy. They would lose everything, the company, the estate, the lifestyle they had built on the backs of other people's labor. I could destroy them with a signature. But that was not what I wanted. Destruction is too quick, too merciful. What I wanted was revelation. I wanted them to understand exactly who they had insulted. I wanted them to feel the weight of their arrogance pressing down on them like a physical force. I wanted them to look at the poor old woman they had dismissed and see something they had never expected. Power. Real power. the kind that does not need to announce itself. The week before the wedding, I received an invitation to the rehearsal dinner. It was addressed to Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore and guest, as if I might have a companion somewhere, hidden in my modest apartment like a spare coat. The dinner would be held at the Thornton estate, another opportunity to display their wealth, to remind everyone of the hierarchy, to make my family feel small and insignificant. I called Patricia that evening. "Mom," she said when she answered, "how are you? I have been dreading this rehearsal dinner. Last time was bad enough. I do not think I can survive another evening of Vivian's subtle insults." "I know," I said, "but I need you to trust me about something." "Trust you?" Patricia's voice was wary. "What do you mean?" "I mean that I need you to do exactly as I say during the dinner. No matter what happens, no matter what you see or hear, I need you to stay calm and trust that I know what I am doing." There was a long pause. "Mom, you are scaring me. What are you planning?" "Nothing dangerous," I assured her. "Just justice. Long overdue justice." Patricia was silent for a moment. Then she laughed, a surprised, almost hopeful sound. "You know what? I trust you. Whatever you are doing, I trust you. You have always protected this family. You have always been there for us. If you say trust you, then I trust you." "Thank you," I said. "And Patricia, wear something you feel confident in, something that makes you feel powerful." She paused again. "Mom, what exactly is going on?" "You will see," I said. "You will all see." The night of the rehearsal dinner arrived with a cold rain that seemed appropriate for what was to come. I dressed carefully, but not in my usual costume. Tonight I wore a black dress I had not touched in years, simple but elegant, cut from fabric that whispered money to anyone who knew how to look. I put on the pearl necklace I had bought myself when I closed my first major deal, real pearls, warm against my skin. I wore heels instead of my sensible flats, and I carried a small clutch instead of my worn purse. Patricia picked me up as usual, but when she saw me, she stopped on the sidewalk and stared. "Mom," she breathed, "you look amazing. I have not seen you look like this since I was a teenager." I smiled. I thought it was time for a change. Gerald was waiting in the car, and his jaw actually dropped when I slid into the back seat. "Eleanor," he said, "you look like a different person." "No," I replied. "I look like myself. Finally." We drove to the Thornton estate in silence. Patricia kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror, curiosity and concern warring in her expression. Gerald fidgeted with his tie, probably sensing that something was different tonight. Something had shifted in the air. The estate was lit up like a beacon, every window glowing, every pathway illuminated. Cars lined the driveway, expensive vehicles driven by expensive people who had never questioned their place in the world. We parked at the edge of the property, where the lesser guests were directed. I stepped out of the car and felt the gravel crunch under my heels. I felt the cold rain on my face. I felt alive in a way I had not felt in years. "Ready?" Patricia asked. "More than ready," I said. We walked up to the entrance. The same servants waited there. The same foyer opened before us. The same chandeliers sparkled overhead. But this time, I did not shrink. I did not diminish myself. I walked in like I owned the place, which, in a sense, I soon would. Vivian spotted us from across the room. Her eyes swept over Patricia and Gerald with the usual dismissal, then landed on me. For a moment, something flickered in her expression. Confusion, perhaps, or recognition of a threat she could not quite identify. "Eleanor," she said, approaching with her fixed smile, "how lovely to see you. You look," she paused, "different tonight." "Thank you," I replied. I decided to make a bit of an effort. Special occasion, after all. Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Yes, well, Please, make yourselves comfortable. Bradley and Meredith are in the drawing room. We moved through the crowd. I could feel eyes on me, could see people reassessing their assumptions. The quiet old grandmother suddenly did not look quite so quiet, did not look quite so old. Meredith found us before we reached the drawing room. "Grammy," she said, stopping short when she saw me. "What happened? You look so different." I smiled warmly. "I just felt like dressing up for once. This is your special night after all." She nodded slowly, still clearly confused. "Well, you look beautiful, really beautiful. I just wish," she trailed off. "Wish what, dear?" She glanced around, then leaned closer. "I wish you had dressed like this before. Maybe things would have been different. Maybe the Thorntons would have treated you with more respect if they had seen you could make an effort." The words stung more than I expected. Even now, even seeing me transformed, Meredith's first instinct was to wish I had changed myself to earn the Thorntons' approval. "Perhaps," I said. "Or perhaps they should have treated me with respect, regardless of what I wore." Meredith frowned. "I did not mean it like that." "I know, dear. I know exactly what you meant." Bradley appeared at her side, his arm snaking around her waist in that possessive way of his. "Eleanor," he said, "you clean up nicely. See, Meredith, I told you your grandmother had potential." Potential. Like I was a fixer-upper property being considered for renovation. "Thank you, Bradley," I replied. "You are too kind." He smiled his practiced smile. "Let me introduce you to some people. My grandfather is very interested in meeting the whole family before the wedding." He led us through the room to a cluster of Thorntons gathered near the fireplace. Bradley II was holding court, glass of whiskey in hand, voice booming over the conversation. "Father," Bradley said, "this is Eleanor, Meredith's grandmother. You met her briefly at Thanksgiving." Bradley too turned, his eyes sweeping over me with that assessing gaze of his. He looked at my dress, my pearls, my composed expression. Something shifted in his face, a flicker of uncertainty replacing his usual confidence. "Eleanor," he said, "good to see you again. You look," he paused, "less grandmotherly tonight." "I have been told I am full of surprises," I replied. He laughed, but it was uneasy. "Is that so? Well, we Thorntons appreciate surprises, as long as they are pleasant ones." I smiled. "I am sure you will find tonight very educational." Before he could respond, the dinner chime sounded. Everyone began moving toward the dining room. This time, I did not wait to be directed to the end of the table. I walked with purpose toward the center, taking a seat that put me directly across from Vivian. She stared at me, clearly unsettled by the breach of protocol. "Eleanor," she said, "this seat is usually reserved for family." "I am family," I replied. "I am Meredith's grandmother. That makes me family, does it not?" "Well, yes, but," she struggled for words. "There is a seating arrangement." "Then perhaps the arrangement needs adjusting," I said pleasantly. "I am an old woman. Surely you would not make me walk all the way to the end of the table." Vivian's jaw tightened, but she could not argue without looking petty in front of her guests. "Of course not," she said through gritted teeth. "Please, stay where you are." "Thank you," I said. "You are so gracious." Dinner began. The conversation flowed as it always did, the Thorntons discussing their investments, their properties, their plans for expansion. Bradley, too, mentioned a new deal he was closing, carefully omitting the fact that he was desperately trying to refinance debt that was crushing his company. "And what about you, Eleanor?" Vivian asked suddenly, her tone suggesting she was looking for ammunition. "What keeps you busy these days?" The table quieted. Everyone turned to look at me, expecting the usual vague answer about knitting or gardening or whatever retired grandmothers were supposed to do. I took a sip of wine. "Well," I said slowly, I suppose I have been doing what I have always done, managing investments, reviewing portfolios, evaluating companies for potential acquisition or dissolution. Vivian blinked. Excuse me? I have worked in finance for most of my life, I explained. I started as a secretary, worked my way up through various positions. Eventually, I founded my own firm. Your own firm, Bradley too repeated, skepticism dripping from every word. In finance, what firm would that be? Whitmore Capital Management, I replied. The silence that followed was profound. I watched understanding dawn on Bradley Two's face, watched the color drain from his cheeks, watched his hand tremble slightly as he set down his glass. Whitmore, he said. Whitmore Capital. You are Eleanor Whitmore? The Eleanor Whitmore? I smiled. I see my reputation precedes me. Vivian looked between her husband and me, confused. What is happening? What is Whitmore Capital? It is the firm, Bradley Two said, his voice strained, that holds a significant portion of our corporate debt. The firm I have been trying to negotiate refinancing terms with for the past 6 months. He stared at me. You are the reason we cannot close the deal. Your people keep blocking every proposal. Not blocking, I corrected. Evaluating. There is a difference. Meredith was pale. Grammy, what is going on? What are you talking about? I turned to my granddaughter, my voice gentle but firm. Meredith, I have loved you your entire life. I have supported you, encouraged you, paid for your education without ever asking for recognition or gratitude. But over the past 2 years, I have watched you change. I have watched you become ashamed of your family. I have watched you let these people, I gestured around the table, treat your mother, your grandmother, everyone who loved you before Bradley came along, like we are embarrassments to be hidden away. Grammy, she whispered, please stop. I cannot stop, I said, because you need to understand something. You need to understand what you have given up for this family, what you have traded away. I turned to face Bradley II directly. Your company is failing, I said. Your investments have tanked. You leveraged everything, including this estate, to secure loans that are coming due in January. My firm holds 30% of that debt. If I call those loans in, you lose everything. The company, the house, the cars, the lifestyle. Everything your family has built for 3 generations, gone in a matter of weeks. Bradley II was sweating now. What do you want? Money? More favorable terms? I do not want your money, I said. I have more than enough of my own. What I want is much simpler than that. Then what? He demanded. I want you to apologize. I want you to apologize to my daughter, whom you have treated like hired help since the day you met her. I want you to apologize to my son-in-law, whom you have mocked for not having your privileged connections. And I want you to apologize to me for every condescending comment, every dismissive glance, every assumption you made about my worth based on my appearance. The table was absolutely silent. I could hear the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner, the crackle of the fire, the sound of my own heartbeat steady and calm. Bradley II's face was red with humiliation and rage. This is blackmail, he spat. You are blackmailing me. I am offering you a choice, I replied. You can swallow your pride and treat my family with the respect we deserve, or you can watch everything you have built crumble around you. The choice is yours. Vivian stood up abruptly. This is outrageous. You cannot come into our home and make threats. We are the Thorntons. We have connections, influence. You cannot just... Actually, I interrupted calmly, I can, because I am not threatening anything. I am simply stating facts. Your husband's company is in trouble. My firm holds the debt. That is not a threat. That is a financial reality you should have been aware of before you decided to humiliate the woman who controls your fate. Meredith was crying now, tears streaming down her cheeks. Grammy, how could you? This was supposed to be my wedding. You have ruined everything. I looked at my granddaughter with sadness and love. Meredith, I did not ruin anything. I simply revealed the truth about who these people are, and the truth about who I am. A truth I kept hidden because I wanted you to find your own way, to build your own success, to never feel like you were living in someone else's shadow. But you used my silence against me. You assumed my modesty was poverty. You let them assume it too. And you were prepared to let them humiliate me forever rather than risk your position in their world. But I love Bradley, Meredith sobbed. I love him, and now you have destroyed everything. If Bradley truly loves you, I said gently, then nothing I have said tonight should change that. If he only valued you as an entry into a certain social class, as a reflection of himself rather than a person in her own right, then you have not lost anything worth keeping. Bradley stood up, his face twisted with anger. This is insane. Meredith, we are leaving. I am not going to sit here and be lectured by your crazy grandmother. Sit down, Bradley, I said, and something in my voice made him hesitate. You should hear this too. He remained standing, but he did not leave. I have built something over the past 40 years, I continued. I have built a company, a reputation, a fortune. Not through inheritance, not through connections, not through marrying the right person. Through work, through intelligence, through persistence, through sacrifice you cannot even imagine. I stood up slowly, letting them all see me clearly. I raised a daughter alone while working 2 jobs. I put myself through school at night while caring for a baby. I climbed from secretary to CEO without anyone giving me a hand up, without anyone believing I could do it, without anyone expecting anything from me but failure. I looked around the table at the Thorntons, at their expensive clothes and expensive jewelry and expensive contempt. You inherited everything you have. You were born on third base and spent your whole lives congratulating yourselves for hitting a home run. You have never built anything. You have never created anything. You have only spent what others created for you. Bradley, too, found his voice. You think money makes you better than us? You think because you earned your fortune instead of inheriting it, that makes you superior? No, I said. I think treating people with dignity makes you better. I think respecting others, regardless of their circumstances, makes you better. I think measuring people by their character instead of their bank accounts makes you better. And by that measure, I am not superior to you. I am simply different from you. I am someone who knows that wealth without wisdom is poverty of the soul. Vivian laughed, a bitter, ugly sound, very philosophical. But you are still a blackmailer. You are still holding our company hostage to force an apology. How is that dignified? I smiled slightly. You misunderstand me, Vivian. I am not forcing anything. I told you I would give you a choice, and I am giving you one. You can apologize sincerely, and we can move forward as a family, as equals, with mutual respect. Or you can refuse, and I will simply allow the natural consequences of your financial decisions to unfold. The loans will come due. You will default. The company will collapse. That is not my doing. That is your doing. I am simply in a position to either help you or step aside. Bradley II was silent, calculating, reassessing. Finally, he spoke. What exactly would these apologies look like? I want you to tell my daughter Patricia that you are sorry for treating her like a servant instead of a guest in your home. I want you to tell my son-in-law Gerald that you regret mocking his career choices without knowing anything about his circumstances. And I want you to tell me that you understand wealth does not equal worth, that you misjudged me, and that you will treat my family with respect going forward. That is all? He asked suspiciously. That is all, I confirmed. An apology, sincerely given, and a commitment to change. In return, I will work with your team on a refinancing package that gives you a realistic chance of recovery. Not charity, just a fair deal between equals. Bradley II looked at his wife. Vivian's face was hard, resistant, but even she could see there was no other option. They had built their entire lives on a foundation of inherited privilege, and now that foundation was crumbling. Finally, Bradley II turned to Patricia. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, his voice stiff but audible. "I apologize for the way I have treated you. I made assumptions about your worth based on your job title and your clothing, and those assumptions were wrong. I should have treated you as family, not as an outsider, and I regret that I did not." Patricia stared at him, clearly shocked. She began. "Thank you. I accept your apology." He turned to Gerald. "Mr. Whitmore, I mocked your career struggles without understanding your situation. I was condescending and dismissive. I am sorry." Gerald nodded slowly, still processing. "Thank you. I appreciate that." Finally, Bradley II faced me. "Eleanor, I underestimated you. I assumed because you dressed simply and lived modestly that you had nothing to offer, that you were someone to be tolerated rather than respected. I was wrong. Clearly, deeply wrong. I apologize for my behavior and the behavior of my family toward you." I held his gaze for a long moment. "Thank you, Bradley. I accept your apology. And I hope you understand that I am not doing this to humiliate you. I am doing this because my granddaughter is going to marry your son, and I want that marriage to have a foundation of respect, not resentment." He nodded stiffly. "I understand." I turned to Vivian. "And you, Vivian? Do you have anything to say?" She looked like she had swallowed something bitter. "I apologize as well. For my comments, my tone, my assumptions. You were a guest in my home, and I did not treat you as one." "Thank you," I said. "I appreciate your honesty." The tension in the room was slowly dissipating, replaced by something else. Not warmth, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of understanding, the beginning of a new dynamic. Meredith was still crying, but softer now, her shoulders shaking with what might have been relief as much as distress. Bradley had sat back down, his expression unreadable. "Grammy," Meredith said finally. "I am sorry. I am so sorry for asking you to hide yourself, for being ashamed, for letting them treat you that way. I did not know. I never imagined." "I know," I said gently, "and I forgive you. But I need you to understand something, Meredith. I would have forgiven you even if I had been exactly what they thought I was. Even if I had been a poor old woman living on a pension, struggling to make ends meet. Because that woman would have deserved respect too. That woman would have been your grandmother, who loved you, who raised your mother, who sacrificed everything so you could have opportunities. The money does not make me worthy of respect. The money just made it easier for them to see it." Meredith nodded slowly, tears still streaming. "I understand. I think I finally understand." I walked around the table and took her hands in mine. "You are going to be a wonderful doctor someday. You are going to help people, heal people, make a difference in the world. But you will only be truly successful if you remember where you came from. If you never forget that the people you treat are people, not categories, not social classes, not dollar amounts in a bank account. Every person has value. Every person has a story. Every person deserves to be seen." "I will remember," she whispered. "I promise I will remember." I hugged her then, and she clung to me like she used to when she was a child, before Bradley, before the Thorntons, before she learned to be ashamed of the people who loved her most. And in that moment, I felt something shift, not just in the room, but in my own heart. The cold anger I had carried for months began to thaw. The need for retribution softened into something else, something warmer, something more hopeful, because this was never really about revenge. It was about truth, about being seen, about refusing to be diminished by people who confuse net worth with worth. The rest of the evening unfolded awkwardly, but peacefully. Conversations resumed, though with notably more care and consideration. Vivian even asked Patricia about her work with what seemed like genuine interest. Bradley II inquired about Gerald's business ideas without mockery. Small steps, but steps nonetheless. Before we left, Bradley II approached me privately. "I need to ask you something," he said quietly. "Why? Why did you hide who you were for so long? You could have shut us down from the beginning. You could have demanded respect from the first moment we met." I considered his question carefully, because I wanted to know who you really were, not who you pretended to be when you thought you were dealing with someone powerful, but who you were when you thought no one was watching, when you thought you could behave without consequence. "And now?" he asked. "Now that you know?" "Now I know that you are capable of change. Whether you actually change is up to you. But at least I know it is possible." He nodded slowly. "I have been rich my entire life. I have never known anything else. I suppose I never thought about what it would be like to be on the other side, to be judged by what you have instead of who you are. Most people do not think about it," I said. "Most people in your position never have to. That is the privilege you were born into. But privilege unexamined becomes arrogance. Arrogance becomes cruelty. And cruelty destroys everything eventually, even the people who practice it." He was silent for a long moment. "Thank you," he said finally, "for the lesson, and for the second chance." I nodded. "Use it wisely." The wedding took place 3 weeks later, on a cold December afternoon with snow dusting the ground like powdered sugar. It was beautiful, though somewhat more subdued than the Thorntons had originally planned. Meredith walked down the aisle in a gown she had chosen herself, not one selected by Vivian. Patricia was seated in the front row beside Vivian, equals in the eyes of anyone watching. Gerald was asked to give a reading during the ceremony, his voice steady and clear. And I sat in the place of honor, the grandmother of the bride, wearing a simple dress and my pearl necklace, looking exactly like myself. During the reception, the tradition of announcing gift amounts was quietly abandoned. In its place, guests were invited to share memories and well wishes for the couple. The shift was subtle but significant, a rejection of display in favor of connection. Bradley found me near the end of the evening, his bow tie loosened, his expression softer than I had ever seen it. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, "I owe you an apology too." "Do you? I was cruel to you, not just in words, but in how I thought about you. I measured you by my family's standards, and I found you lacking. But I was the one who was lacking. I was missing the things that actually matter." I studied his face. "And what things are those?" "Kindness, humility, the ability to see people instead of categories." He paused. "Meredith has been teaching me. She has been telling me stories about her childhood, about the summers she spent with you, about the person she was before she met me. And I realized I had been trying to change her into something she was not supposed to be. Something lesser, actually, than what she already was." I smiled slightly. "And what will you do with that realization?" "I will try to be worthy of her," he said. "Not through money or status, but through actually being a good man, a good husband. Someday, if we are lucky, a good father." "That is all anyone can ask," I said. "And Bradley, take care of her. She has always been special." "I know," he said. "I know that now." The rest of the night passed in a blur of dancing and laughter, and the peculiar warmth that comes when people decide to be genuine with each other. It was not a perfect evening. The scars of years of condescension do not heal in a single night, but it was a beginning. The months that followed brought changes I had not anticipated. Thornton Industries, with the refinancing package my firm negotiated, began a slow recovery. Bradley II, humbled by his brush with bankruptcy, became a more careful leader, less focused on display and more focused on substance. Vivian remained Vivian, but even she had moments of genuine warmth, particularly after Meredith announced her pregnancy. A grandchild, my great-grandchild, a new life that would grow up in a world we had all shaped together. Meredith came to visit me often, sometimes alone, sometimes with Bradley. She would sit on my old sofa in my modest apartment, drinking tea from mismatched cups, and tell me about her work, her hopes, her fears for the future. "Grammy," she said one afternoon, "I have been thinking about what you taught me, about seeing people instead of categories. And I have been volunteering at a free clinic downtown, treating patients who cannot afford regular health care. And you were right. Every single one of them has a story. Every single one of them deserves to be seen." I smiled, pride swelling in my chest. "That is wonderful, Meredith. That is exactly what I hoped you would understand." She reached over and took my hand. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. For believing in me even when I did not deserve it. For showing me what real strength looks like." I squeezed her hand. "You always deserved it. You just forgot for a while. And I have learned something else," she continued, "about wealth, about what it really means." "What have you learned?" "That it is not about what you have. It is about what you do with it. It is about how you treat people. It is about whether you lift others up or push them down. And I want to lift people up. I want to be like you." Tears pricked at my eyes. "You do not need to be like me. You just need to be the best version of yourself. That is enough. That has always been enough." We sat together in comfortable silence, grandmother and granddaughter, two women from different generations who had finally found their way back to each other. Outside my window, the world continued on its way, busy and complicated and full of people measuring each other by bank accounts and social standing. But in my small apartment in that moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was the love between us, the understanding, the truth. And that, I realized, was the real wealth I had been building all along. 1 year after the wedding, I received a phone call that changed everything once more. "Grammy," Meredith's voice was trembling. "I need to tell you something." My heart clenched. "What is it, dear? Is the baby okay?" "The baby is perfect," she said, "but something happened today, something that made me think of you, of everything you taught me." "Tell me." She took a deep breath. "I was at the hospital, doing my rounds. There was an elderly woman in the emergency room, alone, wearing old clothes, no identification, no insurance. The nurses were treating her like she was invisible. They were rushing past her, prioritizing other patients, making comments about homeless people taking up beds. I felt a familiar coldness settle in my chest. "What did you do?" "I stopped," Meredith said. "I looked at her, really looked at her. And I saw you, Grammy. I saw how people looked at you before they knew who you were. And I thought, this woman has a story too. This woman deserves to be seen." So what happened? I sat with her. I held her hand. I asked her about her life. And Grammy, she was a retired teacher. She had taught elementary school for 40 years. She had helped hundreds of children learn to read. She was alone because her husband had died, and her children lived far away, and she had fallen while walking home from the grocery store. She was not homeless. She was just old and hurt and scared. Meredith's voice cracked. "The other doctors thought I was wasting time. They said I should move on to patients who actually needed treatment. But I stayed with her until her son arrived from 2 states away. And when he got there, he told me she had been a principal influence in his life, that she had inspired him to become a teacher himself, that there was a scholarship fund in her name at the local high school." I wiped tears from my own eyes. "You did exactly the right thing, Meredith." "I know," she said, "because you taught me. You taught me that every person has value. Every person has a story. And now I am teaching Bradley, and someday we will teach our children. That is all I ever wanted, I whispered. That is the only legacy that matters. After I hung up the phone, I sat in my quiet apartment and thought about the strange journey that had brought me here. From secretary to CEO, from poor young mother to wealthy grandmother, from invisible to undeniable. But the money was never the point. The money was just a tool, a means to an end. What mattered was the impact, the lives touched, the lessons passed down through generations. I walked to my window and looked out at the city, at the millions of people going about their lives, each one carrying their own stories, their own struggles, their own quiet heroisms. Somewhere out there, another grandmother was being dismissed by her family. Another mother was being mocked for her modest circumstances. Another woman was being measured by what she lacked instead of what she possessed. And I wished I could tell them all what I had learned. That patience is its own form of power. That dignity cannot be taken, only surrendered. That the truth, spoken at the right moment, can reshape the world. 2 years after that Thanksgiving dinner, Bradley II invited me to lunch. Just the two of us, at a modest restaurant he had chosen specifically because it reminded him of the places he had dismissed his entire life. I have been doing some thinking, he said over sandwiches and soup, about legacy, about what I want to leave behind. I listened, curious about where this was going. My whole life, I thought legacy meant money, property, the family name, things that could be counted and displayed. But you showed me something different. You showed me that legacy is about how you treat people, about the values you instill, about whether the world is better because you were in it. He set down his spoon. I have decided to establish a foundation, not for tax benefits, but for real change. Scholarships for first-generation college students, mentorship programs for young entrepreneurs who do not have connections, the kind of help I never needed because I was born into it, but the kind of help that changes lives for people who were not. That is wonderful, Bradley, I said. What made you decide this? He smiled ruefully. You did, and Meredith, and watching my son become a different kind of man than I was. I realized that I had spent my whole life perpetuating a system that rewarded accident of birth over merit, and I do not want that to be my legacy. I reached across the table and touched his hand. It takes courage to change. Most people never manage it. Most people, he said, never have someone shake them awake the way you shook us. That dinner, those apologies, the things you made us see about ourselves. It was painful, but pain is often the prerequisite for growth. I nodded. I am proud of you, Bradley, genuinely proud. He looked surprised. After everything I said to you? After how I treated your family? Growth deserves recognition, I replied. And forgiveness is not about forgetting. It is about choosing to move forward instead of staying trapped in the past. We finished our lunch in comfortable conversation, two people who had started as adversaries and become something unexpected. Not quite friends, perhaps, but allies in something larger than ourselves. The years that followed brought more changes than I could have imagined. My great-granddaughter was born on a spring morning, 7 pounds of perfection with her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn chin. They named her Eleanor, after me. Little Eleanor, Meredith said, placing the baby in my arms for the first time. I want her to grow up knowing who she was named for, knowing that strength does not always look the way people expect, knowing that the quietest voice in the room is sometimes the most powerful. I held my namesake close, feeling her warmth, her fragility, her infinite potential, and I made her a silent promise. I would be there for her as I had been for her mother. I would teach her the things that cannot be bought or inherited. I would help her become whoever she was meant to be. Patricia divorced Gerald the year after the wedding, not because of the Thorntons, but because she finally found the courage to admit that she deserved better. She deserved a partner who contributed, who supported, who showed up. "I am sorry, Mom," she told me. "I know you always saw it. I know you never said anything because you wanted me to figure it out myself." "I just wanted you to be happy," I said. "Whatever that looks like for you." She moved into a new apartment, started a new job, began building a life that was entirely her own. And she flourished in ways I had never seen before. The weight of carrying Gerald had been holding her down for years, and without it, she rose. "You know what I realized, Mom?" she said one evening over dinner. "I spent so many years being ashamed of where we came from, of our small apartment, our secondhand furniture, our lack of fancy things. But now I understand that none of that matters. What matters is how hard you worked, how much you sacrificed, how you never let circumstances define you." I reached across the table and took her hand. "I never wanted you to feel ashamed." "I know," she said, "and I never should have. You gave me everything that mattered: love, support, a foundation to build on. The Thorntons had money, but they did not have what we had. They did not have a mother who would work 3 jobs to put food on the table. They did not have a grandmother who would pay for college without ever asking for credit. They had wealth, but we had something better." "What is that?" I asked. "Integrity," she said. "The real kind. The kind that does not change depending on who is watching." 3 years after my confrontation with the Thorntons, Vivian came to see me. Alone, unannounced, humble. She stood in my doorway, her designer clothes somehow less imposing than they used to be, her expression uncertain. "May I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside, gesturing toward my modest living room. She sat on my old sofa, looking around at the space that had once seemed so beneath her. "I owe you a real apology," she said. "Not the one I gave at the dinner. That was forced. That was survival. This is different." I listened, waiting. "I have spent the last 3 years thinking about what you said, about how we measured people, about how I measured you. And I realized you were right. I was empty. I was filling my life with things, with displays, with the appearance of success, because I did not have anything real inside." She looked at her hands. "I grew up poor too, you know. Not as poor as you, perhaps, but poor enough to remember what it felt like. And when I married Bradley, when I entered this world of wealth and privilege, I swore I would never feel that way again. I swore I would make sure everyone knew I belonged here now." I nodded slowly. "And so you became the thing you feared." "Exactly," she whispered. "I became the gatekeeper, the enforcer, the one who decided who was worthy and who was not. Because if I could control who got in, maybe no one would notice that I had sneaked in myself." I reached over and took her hand, the same hand that had offered me such cold greetings, such dismissive touches, such calculated cruelty. "Vivian," I said gently, "we all carry scars from where we came from. The question is whether we let those scars make us cruel or make us kind. You chose cruelty for a long time, but you are choosing differently now. That matters." She started to cry, quietly, the tears of someone who had been holding back for years. "I am sorry," she said, "for every comment, every look, every assumption. I was projecting my own fears onto you, my own shame about where I came from, and you did not deserve any of it." "I forgive you," I said, "and I thank you for having the courage to come here and say this." She stayed for tea. We talked for hours. 2 women from poor beginnings who had taken very different paths to the same destination. By the time she left, something had shifted between us. Not friendship exactly, but understanding, recognition, a truce born of mutual respect. I told her about my own journey, about the nights I had cried alone in my small apartment, about the times I had doubted whether I would ever amount to anything. I told her about the sacrifices I had made, the relationships I had lost, the price I had paid for my success. And she listened. really listened, perhaps for the first time in her life. "We are not so different," she said finally. "We both wanted security. We both wanted to prove something. We just went about it in different ways." "The difference," I said, "is that I never forgot where I came from. I never let my success make me think I was better than the people who were still struggling, because I knew that luck plays a bigger role than we like to admit. I was smart and hardworking, yes, but I also had opportunities that others did not. I had a child who motivated me to push harder. I had health, energy, determination. Not everyone has those things." Vivian nodded slowly. "I understand that now." Bradley's company nearly collapsed. For the first time in his life, he faced real failure, real fear. It changed him. It changed both of us. "Adversity has a way of revealing character," I said, "and reshaping it." "You reshaped ours," she admitted. "That night at dinner, when you revealed who you really were, it was like watching a mirror shatter. All those assumptions we had made, all those judgments we had passed, they all came crashing down around us, and we had to look at what was underneath." "What did you find?" "Nothing," she said. "Nothing worth keeping anyway. Just fear and insecurity dressed up in expensive clothes. Just people pretending to be more than we were because we were terrified of being found out." "And now?" "Now I am trying to build something real, something that will last, something that does not depend on bank accounts or social status. I am trying to be a better grandmother to little Eleanor, a better mother-in-law to Meredith, a better person. That is all any of us can do," I said. "Try to be better today than we were yesterday." She smiled, the first genuine smile I had ever seen from her. "Thank you, Eleanor, for giving me another chance, for not giving up on us." I smiled back. Giving up was never an option. Meredith is my granddaughter. Her happiness is my priority, and her happiness includes your family, flaws and all. We hugged goodbye at my door, two former adversaries who had found common ground through the wreckage of their assumptions. And now I am here, in my quiet apartment, with my view of the city, with my memories and my hopes and my gratitude for everything this life has given me. I am 73 years old. I have watched empires rise and fall. I have built something from nothing and learned that nothing is more valuable than something. I have loved and lost and loved again. I have made mistakes and found redemption and taught others to do the same. But the lesson I keep coming back to, the one that matters more than all my business acumen or financial success, is this. Every person is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Every person carries a story that would break your heart if you took the time to listen. Every person deserves to be seen, not as a category or a class or a dollar amount, but as a human being with infinite worth. The Thorntons learned that lesson. My granddaughter learned it. Even I learned it more deeply through the process of teaching it to others. And now, maybe, you have learned it too. The world is full of people like Vivian used to be. People who measure worth by appearances, who dismiss anyone who does not meet their narrow standards. But the world is also full of people like the taxi driver who drove me home that Thanksgiving night. People who see past the surface to the soul underneath. Which kind of person will you be? Have you ever been dismissed because of how you looked? Have you ever been judged by people who did not bother to learn your story? Tell me in the comments. Share your experience. Because sometimes, knowing that others have walked the same path makes the journey a little less lonely. I think about my great-granddaughter, little Eleanor, growing up in a world that will try to teach her that money equals value, that status equals worth, that the people at the bottom deserve to be there. And I know that her parents will teach her differently. I know that the lesson I fought so hard to impart will live on through her. That is my real legacy. Not the money, not the company, not the fortune I built through 40 years of sacrifice. My real legacy is the understanding that passed from me to my daughter, from my daughter to my granddaughter, from my granddaughter to her child. The understanding that every person matters, that dignity is inherent, not earned, that the way we treat others defines us far more than anything we own. Last week, Meredith brought little Eleanor to visit me. She is 3 now, curious and bright and full of questions about everything. Grammy, she said, using the name she had learned from her mother. Why is your house so small? Meredith started to apologize, but I held up my hand. I knelt down to Eleanor's level. My house is small because I do not need a big one. I have everything I need right here. A comfortable chair, a warm bed, pictures of the people I love. What else could I want? She thought about this seriously. Mommy says you could buy a castle if you wanted. I could, I agreed. But would a castle make me happier? She considered. I do not know. Castles have dragons. I laughed. You are absolutely right. Castles do have dragons. And my little apartment has something much better. What? She asked, eyes wide. I scooped her up and carried her to the window. It has this view, and these memories, and you coming to visit and asking me important questions. She giggled and wrapped her arms around my neck. I love you, Grammy. I love you too, little one, more than all the castles in the world. Meredith was watching us with tears in her eyes. Mom, she said to me later, after Eleanor had fallen asleep on my couch, I am so grateful for everything you taught me, for the person you helped me become. You did the work yourself, I reminded her. I just pointed you in the right direction. No, she said firmly. You did more than that. You showed me that it was possible. You showed me that a woman could come from nothing and build something extraordinary. You showed me that success does not have to change who you are at your core. She took my hands in hers. And you showed me that it is never too late to tell the truth. Even when the truth is uncomfortable, even when it might cost you everything. I squeezed her hands. The truth is always worth it, always. Even when it hurts, even when it creates conflict, because living a lie is worse. Living a lie slowly poisons everything it touches. That Thanksgiving dinner changed everything, but not in the way I expected. I thought it would be about revenge, about finally showing the Thorntons who I really was, about making them pay for their cruelty. But it turned out to be about something much more important. It turned out to be about healing, about growth, about the possibility of change. They took my dignity for granted. They assumed my simplicity was poverty. They treated me like I was invisible. But in the end, I did not need to punish them. The truth was punishment enough. And from that truth, something new emerged, something better than revenge, reconciliation, understanding, the beginning of a real family built not on money or status, but on mutual respect and shared values. I still live in my modest apartment. I still wear my sensible clothes. I still drive my old car and clip my coupons and live simply. Not because I cannot afford better, but because I finally understand what better really means. And that understanding is worth more than all the money in the world. They tried to make me feel small. They tried to make me feel ashamed of who I was and where I came from. But they could not diminish me because I knew something they did not. I knew that true wealth has nothing to do with bank accounts. True wealth is measured in love, in integrity, in the quiet satisfaction of knowing you have lived according to your values. The Thorntons had money, but they were poor in all the ways that matter. And I was rich beyond measure, even when I was pretending to have nothing at all. So if you are out there listening to this story and you have ever felt invisible, if you have ever been dismissed because of your job or your clothes or your lack of connections, if you have ever been treated like you do not matter because you do not meet someone else's shallow standards, remember this: you matter. Your story matters. Your worth is not determined by what you have, but by who you are. And someday, when the moment is right, you will have the chance to show them exactly who you are. When that moment comes, do not waste it. Speak your truth, claim your dignity, and never ever apologize for being yourself. Because that self, that authentic, imperfect, complicated self, is worthy of respect. Always has been, always will be. They took everything from me that night. My anonymity, my carefully constructed disguise, my protection. But in return, I got something much more valuable. I got my family back. I got my granddaughter back. I got the truth, spoken out loud at last. And I would make that trade again, 1,000 times over. Did you enjoy this story? I would love to hear which city you are listening from. Let us meet in the comments. If this story touched your heart, consider supporting me with a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this one. Your kindness means the world to me. I am looking forward to your thoughts on this story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There is so much more waiting for you on my channel. Do not forget to subscribe. I will see you in the next life story with love and respect.